Hello and welcome to the Dapper Gaffer channel. I'm Josiah. We're here at City Stage Studios in Rockford, Illinois, hanging out in the back lot today. And we're talking about lighting day exteriors. Here we are in raw, unmodified sunlight. We've at least picked that it's off to this side of the frame. How do we make day exteriors look good? Very similar to how we make anything else look good. What looks pleasing to the eye or cinematic is typically an offside key, controlling your contrast ratio with a bounce or a fill, and having some sort of a backlight to edge you out from the scene. But we're having to do that with one primary source that's moving throughout the day. So talent isn't here yet, but look how beautiful this scene looks already, and we haven't done anything to modify the light. That's all about being here the right time of day with the right orientation to the sun. Using the sun as our backlight, it can backlight the entire scene, and it just looks great because we're here at the right time of day. Unfortunately, the sun doesn't stay in the same spot all day, and we're gonna try to help you learn how to deal with that. All right, so we've selected our composition for this shot, worked that out with the DP. We're shooting a medium wide, I'd say, on this setup. And we're just setting some frames, getting some stuff prepped before the talent gets here. And this is all after we had meetings and scouts ahead of time to know what time we want to be here for the shot. So let's say you're shooting your shot at 9 o'clock in the morning. Obviously, we're not showing up at 9. We've discussed with production how much time we need beforehand to get everything set. We've been here for a while already, so when talent actually comes in, we're just making adjustments instead of lighting the whole scene around them. And that's probably the biggest thing that you can take away from lighting day exteriors is you want to be in the right place at the right time of day and be aware of where the sun's going to be if it's a sunny day, because we have to orient ourselves to what the sun is doing, and we just modify it from there. Hello, Jude. Jude is our model today. So what we wanted to demonstrate with this wide setup was how if we're here at the right time of day, we can shoot, we can see everywhere we want to see, we can pan and move the camera, and none of our modification gets in the way of the shot. Now we're going to try to sweeten it up a little bit and see what we can do while still keeping a nice wide frame. So let's go ahead and bring in that Ultrabounce we've got here.
Josiah.
Yep.
Let's bring it a little more from the right side, so not directly kind of in front of her.
Wrappy?
Yeah, don't wrap it as much.
Yep.
We'll go up now.
And pull your end back some. Nate, you're good where you're at. Okay, there we go, that's good. The best way to see where the light is going and bouncing is to be right where the talent is, because that's where you're directing the light. And I'm just looking at like where is this bounce brightest to my eye, and it's at that angle. So we brought Nate's in as close as we can, still be out of frame, and then adjusted that so we're hitting directly on this side. So that's doing nothing there. And just, yeah, 16.5-ish. Okay, go ahead and tilt that in. Yeah, that's good there. And you can see that kind of soft push it gives. It gave us about a stop of additional fill on this side. So we're pretty flat at the moment. Hopefully we can see that it's filled in her face a lot more. We've got this nice big non-sourcey light. And the beauty of having something this size is we can be further away and it still makes a difference. If we were using like a 4x or something smaller than that, it's just going to get harder and more sourcey. So having a 12x setup like this, we can be further away and still cover this whole wide scene that we're dealing with here. Now we're going to add some additional dimension by subtracting light on this side. So this frame we have tilted backward because the sun's here. It's helping push the light this direction more. This one we're kind of just trying to subtract whatever natural fill light is coming on this side. So if we tilt the top toward us, that's taking out some of that skylight that we have coming in. And yeah, that's probably good there. And then we're just gonna try to drop it down as low as we can while still being out of frame. But now, look at how much shape we have on Jude's face here. And we'll just measure that for reference sake. What I'm doing here is just to block the sunlight, so that's not affecting my reading. We're getting about a stop difference there. Okay. So now this is a good illustration of, like, you might think a 12 by seems like a huge piece of material. They really start to feel pretty small outside, and that's why they tend to be the go-to. They're about the right size to be manageable without, having just a bigger crew. But this is really about as close as we can be with these big modifiers. And you can see we were only able to get about a stop difference from one side of her face to the other. Now, if we were wanting to be a more dramatic scene, we would want more of a contrast than that. We could bring in, maybe another 12 by back in that way, as long as we could keep it out of the shot. That would help create a little bit more. But on the camera side of her face, there's not a whole lot more light we can take out without being in the shot, or with going something much bigger, like a fly swatter or something like that, or tighten up our shot, because obviously if we could be tighter, we don't have to see so wide. We can bring modifiers in closer and have more control over the ratio. For reference, we're working off a 3-ton today, even though we're in the back lot of the studio. Wanted to give you an idea of the tools you would typically have to work with if you're working off a truck that size. So as you see stuff we're moving around with today, this is all stuff that you would typically find on a 3-ton package. Could I get that half soft frost, Nate?
Copy, half soft frost.
Thank you. A little bit of weight to that. All right, so in this instance, we swapped out our 12 by on this side with a gold and silver lamé checker pattern. Sometimes, we'll call it an Elvis rag, because it looks like one of Elvis's jumpsuits or something like that. Yeah, so we're just gonna tilt this lamé in and out so you can see what it's doing for the scene here.
Okay, table.
And as you can see, it's doing an awful lot. Our sun is starting to wrap more around to this side of Jude's face. You can see when she's facing this direction, we're starting to spill on her nose, which we were not getting before. So a lamé is, in my mind, it's like the rag version of a reflector board. It's just bigger, and it's soft, but it has a similar sort of reflectance quality, somewhere between the soft and the hard side of a reflector board. So in my mind, I think of it like we're putting up a 12 by 12 reflector board. And I tend to gravitate toward the gold and silver checker, because sometimes, like if you use just silver, it tends to be a little cool for my taste, and if I use just gold, it tends to be too warm. I'm still getting a real nice fill from that scene all the way till about here. It starts to fall off a little bit. So we're still lighting a really nice breadth of this scene, thanks to the size of our bounce, but it's just harsher because of the type of material that we're using. But with lamé, you can be a lot further away and still fill in the scene. So we're, as you can see, have a lot more distance on this side of the frame, but we're getting a similar light level in the scene, maybe just a touch more. But you can see the light's a lot harsher because it's just a more reflectant material than the Ultrabounce that we were using before. And why don't we try just to turn this into a bit more of a side scratch? You want to? Yeah. So let's roll this whole frame around this side of the scene some more. Yep, that's good. And you're about the right angle too. How's that look on camera?
That's much better.
So we're side lighting her here. I'm not seeing any of that light come onto her right cheek, which is what I'd be looking for. So I'd classify that as kind of like a side light scenario, but it looks great, nice and dynamic. It is, very luminescent on her skin on that side, just because of the material that we're using, and probably the skincare routine that you want to ask Jude about after the finish of this video. And we're going to do one more thing where we actually use this in conjunction with a thin piece of diffusion to show how that looks. Okay, let's go ahead and bring that frame in about where we had that Ultrabounce before. We're creating a book light essentially. So we're gonna use this as diffusion. We don't have to, match the angle of the sun. We're just gonna have it fairly straight up and down. And that's looking pretty good. Okay, now let's move this lamé back behind there. There it is out.
And coming in.
And tilting that guy back in. Oh, look at how it just, that's probably my favorite look of the ones that we've got so far. Aside from the sun being higher in the sky, it's a nice medium between the two. So it's a little bit more directional, getting some more dimension on her face, but it's obviously not as hard as just having that lamé bouncing the raw sun back at her face. And the beauty of, you know, we're obviously not using any powered fixtures here. The beauty of grip light, you know, they say grip light is the best light, is that it undulates, it fluctuates with the sun. So if the sun, you know, goes behind, we have like no clouds today, but if the sun goes behind a cloud or, you know, it is moving slightly, like everything else is kind of working in the same ratios with each other, as opposed to a hard light where it's not going to do that. When you're lighting day exteriors, adaptability is key. You got to be able to anticipate where the sun's starting, where it's going to end, and how to adjust to it throughout the day. Orient yourself to it and have a plan in place to make it work for your scene. Common practice, wide shots early in the morning, late in the afternoon, and shoot the mediums and close-ups in the middle of the day. Now, we happen to be pretty far north in the Northern Hemisphere, Chicago area, and we're not going to really get very ugly sun because it's late October and it's almost noon now and the sun is still in a decent workable condition. If you're closer to the equator, you know, middle of summer, and the sun is like here, that's the toughest thing to deal with. At the start of the day, we had that beautiful broad backlight. We picked this direction because of that time of day where we could shoot our wide. Now, when the sun is coming to a less ideal location in the sky, we're gonna move in to our medium and tight shots where we have a lot more ability to control how that light looks. Hello again, Jude.
I can't see you.
I can't see. So here we are in the afternoon. The sun's come around to this side. It's no longer our backlight. It's blasting us in the face. Let's bring in some diffusion and start to make it look good using the sun as our key light.
Yep, you're safe.
All right. I mean, that's covering that. And then let's get our reflector back there to try to bring the sun in from a similar angle.
Cutting.
How did we select the diffusion that we used for this side? Well, the background that you're shooting against kind of dictates what you can use there. We wanted it to be relatively soft because that's what we were going for earlier in the day. But given that we still had a little bit of shadowiness in the background, we could use something with a little bit of thickness to it. This is a quarter grid, which is fairly thin, but still has a good amount of diffusion quality to it. Since we had the backlight coming earlier, we've just put a mirror board, a shiny board back there to bounce the sun into the same angle roughly it was earlier. And then we have this solid to control the fill to taste. And if you're shooting this out in a sequence, I think we're close enough that, you know, the average viewer is not gonna be able to tell that we shot it at a completely different time of day because we're moving into those closer shots. And you'll probably have some transitionary elements or trickery to, you know, help the audience not see that. All right, so we brought in some diffusion, which looks a lot nicer for our key and is less blinding for the talent, but you're seeing the issue that we have at the same time. This is a 12x we're using, and you can very clearly see the shadow on the ground all the way around us, which is pretty unnatural. One other way you could mitigate that is to add foliage around the edges of this frame to kind of help it blend a little bit more organically into the scene, as if there was maybe a tree off to this side. And that's why typically you're gonna schedule your mediums and your close-ups in the middle of the day to reduce the sizes of materials that you have to work with. Now let's say for some reason in this scene we needed to shoot toward this area with this hotter background behind us. That's an instance where the diffusion choice is possibly dictated on what you're seeing back there. That building is kicking off some pretty hot light back at us. So if we were to have a thicker diffusion than this up, it would look unnatural, like she's standing under an overhang in the middle of this open field or something like that. So we swapped that quarter grid out with a half soft frost, which is a thinner diffusion. It's one of my probably favorite to use as an exterior overhead diff because I think it does a great job of just slightly diffusing the sunlight, you know, making it a little bit more pleasing on the skin, but yet retaining a lot of the exposure value that we're getting if we're in a scenario where we have a bright background. Let's say we don't have the budget or the resources for 12 by material on a project. 12 bys require an appropriate crew and a truck to transport the stuff in. The next best option, and really one of the fastest ways to modify light outside, in my opinion, is working with 4 by materials. So let's go ahead and light this scene one more time using only 4 by materials. Now we've relit this scene using just 4 by materials off that cart. As you can see, it's really not a great solution for more than one person. The light's, you know, leaking down here and on Jude's legs, but it's a fast way to work if you're, you know, kind of, you doing like a medium or a tight on a single individual. So let's go ahead and recompose that shot to what we actually lit for. And it's the same concept as before. We switched to a little thicker diffusion because I felt we could afford to do that. It's a half grid now, neg on that side, and still kicking that light back for a backlight on Jude as well. But we are able to set this up in much less time than it takes to skin up and move around 12 by frames. In summary, day exteriors is a lot about adapting to where the sun is in the sky at a particular time of day and using it to your advantage. But a lot of that goes back to pre-production and having a discussion with production about what time of day you're shooting, what scenes, in which direction. Preparation is key. The size of your materials have a big effect on what you can do compositionally, but as we've seen hopefully today, you can make a scene look pretty good without firing up a single powered fixture. We're really using the same lighting principles, but just using different tools to achieve those results. Thanks for coming along with us today on this lighting journey. I hope it served as a good introduction for you on how to tackle lighting day exteriors. There's a lot more we could have talked about, so if you have any questions on anything you would like some clarity on, feel free to leave it in the comments, and I'm sure we'll be shooting some future episodes regarding day exteriors in the future. That's all we've got for today. Thanks for sticking around. We'll see you on the next one. So this is kind of a twofold illustration. If you have one of these on a truck, it's a very fast way to move. I have everything I need here. My 4 bys, you'll see I actually used combos to hold these up. I like using combos outside because they're more resistant to wind over C-stands. And I can hook those on the back of the cart. I've got bags I can throw underneath. I've got all sorts of diffusion options here, solids, and even some nets, and our reflectors that you see in the back, right in the middle of the cart. Also, if you're on more of a budget, project where you don't even have a cart like this, you can still fit a fair few of these in a moderate sized vehicle. Throw them in the back of a pickup truck or like a city van or something like that, and it's still a fast way to work because they're pre-built. You're not having to reskin frames or pop out diffusion, stuff like that.